dust hangs over the plains of Africa. The Roman line holds barely. Then a tremor on the horizon. Riders without saddles, javelins held low. The Numidian cavalry arrives. In minutes, the greatest tactician of his age suffers his only decisive defeat. But to see how Carthage, a city of harbours and horsehead coins, arrived at this moment, we need to go back even further. Dawn breaks over a double harbour carved into the coast of North Africa. In the outer rectangle, merchant ships creak against their moorings, hulls dark with tar, decks heavy with African grain, olive oil, ivory and hides. Beyond it, a circular inner basin cradles swift galleys, oared by men from Africa and the islands. This is Hadasht, or Carthage, the new city, the proud daughter of Phoenician Tyre, by now long independent and confident. On its coins gleams a horse's head, paired with a palm tree, and the serene face of Tanit, great lady of the city. Carthage's aristocrats, their leaders called suffetes, derived from the word judges, confer in cool colonnades with the Senate, or Council of Elders, and the stern tribunal later remembered as the 104. The constitution is balanced. Magistrates checked by councils, and councils checked by a popular assembly. Proudly stable, practical, made for maritime merchants and military marshals alike. Across the water, the western Mediterranean is a chessboard. To the north, Greek Sicily glitters with cities like Syracuse and Agrigento. To the west, Iberian mines promise silver. Carthage was a nodal city, and around it a constellation of Berber peoples and states. The Massiliae and Massacili Numidians, the Mori of Mauretania, the Gaetuli, Garamantes and others, each with its chiefs and kings, and always a healthy rivalry with the city by the sea. Before Carthage became an oligarchic republic with suffetes, it was ruled by a line of kings from the Magonid dynasty, but they lost most royal power after the death of Hamilcar in 480. They had stitched treaties with the Etruscans and Romans to secure their influence in the west. Hamilcar probed the northern Atlantic, while Hanno the Navigator led a famed expedition beyond the Pillars of Heracles, today's Straits of Gibraltar, dotting the African coast with outposts, describing rivers of fire, most likely a volcano, and shaggy cliff-climbing gorillae on a forested shore. Near to Carthage, large estates, later immortalized by the agronomist Mago, cultivated wheat, barley, vines, olives, and figs. Mago's agricultural handbook, later translated into Latin and Greek, systematized pruning, grafting, and estate management. Inland alliances with Berber chiefs brought tribute and, crucially, cavalry for Carthage's armies. The city's coinage and cults travelled with its merchants, and so did its administrators and tax collectors. The first great test came from Sicily, the world's richest island. For those who don't know, our channel tries to share history from all over the world, but have never done ad reads or spoken to advertisers. All we ask is to subscribe if you enjoy these historical journeys, and if possible, consider becoming a member, and we can finish this project together. Carthage backed the Phoenician communities there and opposed the expanding Greek polis. In 480 BCE, a Carthaginian host under Hamilcar crossed to punish Himera, and was shattered by a Greek coalition led by Gelon of Syracuse. The disaster scorched Carthaginian pride. A generation later, the city returned, better prepared. After 7 decades in the Second Sicilian War, Carthage smashed Selinus and Himera, then ground down Agrigento, in a grueling siege that ended with plague falling on the Carthaginian camp. The war ended in 405 BCE, with the tyrant Dionysius recognizing a Carthaginian sphere in western Sicily. During the Third Sicilian War in 398 BCE, Dionysius laid siege to Motia, the Punic jewel on the island. But Carthage regrouped and founded a nearby city called Lilybaeum, part port, part fortress. After 2 more wars with Dionysius, which didn't go well for the Syracusan king, the Greeks, under General Timoleon, broke a Punic expedition on the Crimmisus. and Greek settlers were able to sweep back into cities Carthage had previously captured. The elite sacred band of Carthaginian citizens, hoplites in bright armour, won their place in history, but then perished in a single unlucky day. Carthage's generals then leaned harder on allies and mercenaries. Libyan Berber infantry with long shields and thrusting spears, Numidian light cavalry on small, tireless horses, Iberian swordsmen and Gallic warriors, Balearic slingers, all added to the rumbling elephants, captured and trained in North Africa, whose thundering shock could shatter any battle line. Then came Agathocles, tyrant of Syracuse, who initiated yet another Sicilian War, this time the 7th. He was pushed back, and after being cornered in Sicily, he secretly sailed straight for Africa, landing near Cape Bon. Panic bit Carthage. Berber chiefs weighed chances and some rebelled. Carthaginian commander Bomilcar took advantage of the chaos and tried to overthrow the republic in favour of tyranny. But the coup failed, and Bomilcar was subsequently crucified. Proof that Carthage's oligarchy jealously guarded its power. Carthage also withstood Agathocles, as Punic fleets cut off his lifelines in Sicily. The near miss taught Carthage an old lesson again. Africa, not Sicily, is the core that must be protected. Meanwhile, the city's population swelled. Workshops hammered out amphorae and navy, and at night the tophets, religious sanctuaries, flickered with offerings to Baal Hammon and Tanit, both gods associated with old Levantine gods, although the name of Tanit is of Libyan origin. The offerings included ritual sacrifice, including of children. Yet it is still debated how common this was. It was initially thought to be a regular ritual in which children were sacrificed to the god Moloch, but it most likely occurred only in times of dire crisis. Melkart, god of strength, was later identified with Hercules by the Greeks and Romans. Eshmun, god of healing, tended the sick. In the highlands, Berber tombs proclaimed new ambitions. The great circular mausoleum of Madrasan rose in eastern Numidia for their kings. A royal tumulus ringed with Doric half-columns, Greek style in Berber stone. An early Tifinagh alphabet began to appear, cousin to Punic letters, yet distinctly local. In the 4th and early 3rd centuries, as the Magonids faded, other factions rose, like Hanno the Great and the Barcids, a fierce rivalry, which argued about maritime caution or aggressive expansion, and about whether to squeeze the Libyan countryside for taxes or to court it. The rival now rising from the Italian peninsula was Rome. In 264, the spark came from Messana. There, a Campanian mercenary gang, the Mamertines, dragged both powers into a quarrel that became the First Punic War. 23 years of learning each other's habits and strengths. Rome, a land power, built a navy, using a Carthaginian ship as a blueprint. Carthage, a sea power, excelled on land through their foreign mercenaries. In 262 BCE, Rome took Agrigentum. In 260 at Mylae, Romans used a device called the corvus, or raven, that allowed them to hook onto and board Carthaginian ships, turning maritime battles into hand-to-hand combat. In 256 BCE, at Ignomus, perhaps the largest oared battle ever, Rome prevailed and then invaded Africa under Marcus Atilius Regulus. Panic set in again at Carthage, but a Spartan mercenary, Xanthippus, drilled the city's troops, and on the Bagradas plain at the Battle of Tunis unleashed elephants and cavalry that trampled the Roman army. Hope returned, and storms wrecked Roman fleets. Carthaginian admiral Adherbal stung Rome at Drepana in 249, lifting a blockade and sweeping Rome out of the sea. But instead of surrender, the Roman Senate funded the building of a new fleet from private citizens. They soon returned, and Lilybaeum was blockaded for years. In 241, the rebuilt Roman fleet intercepted and wrecked a large but slow and supply-laden Carthaginian convoy fleet en route to Sicily, and soon after, Carthage sued for peace. Sicily was lost, and a heavy indemnity imposed. The sea, had changed hands. But peace did not bring stability. Unpaid Carthaginian mercenaries gathered at Sicca Veneria to collect their payments. Carthaginian negotiators bungled grievances, were accused of late pay and harsh discipline, all combined with Libyan anger at taxes and requisitions. The revolt flared under leaders like Mathos, a Libyan, and Spendius, a Campanian former slave from Italy, drawing in towns and tribes down to the Sahel. At Utica and Hippo, Punic garrisons were besieged, defended unsuccessfully by Hanno the Great, and roads became ambush grounds as captured officers were mutilated. But Carthaginian commander Hamilcar Barca answered in kind. Battles at the Bagradas crossings led to a grim, systematic reconquest. By 237, Hamilcar had crushed the rebellion, but at a cost. Rome opportunistically seized Sardinia and Corsica, adding another indemnity. Carthage's ruling families concluded that recovery required two things: stability and new revenues. They found both in Iberia. The same year the Mercenary War ended, Hamilcar Barca crossed to southern Spain with his young son Hannibal and son-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair. Over the next decade, he forged alliances and fought campaigns among both Iberians and Celtiberians, tapping silver mines to pay troops and indemnities. After Hamilcar fell in battle, Hasdrubal consolidated the gains, founding Carthago Nova, modern Cartagena, around 228 BCE, a fortified harbour with shipyards and warehouses, a miniature Carthage facing the Western Sea. 2 years later, Rome and Carthage concluded a treaty, setting the Ebro River as a boundary they were not to pass. When Hasdrubal was assassinated in 221, the army acclaimed Hannibal Barca, who tested his men in harsh mountain campaigns. His most fraught early action was at Saguntum, a Roman allied city south of the Ebro. After a long siege, Saguntum fell. Rome, of course, declared war. The Second Punic War, a shorter but greater struggle, had begun. In the spring of 218 BCE, Hannibal set out over the Pyrenees, crossed the Rhone, threaded the Alps with elephants and a hardened multinational army, and entered Italy before winter. There he dealt Rome a trio of hammer blows: Ticinus in November 218, Trebia in December, and Lake Trasimene in June 217. It all culminated a year later in August at Cannae, where a double envelopment annihilated a Roman army. Alliances shifted. Capua and other southern communities defected to Hannibal. Rome bled but did not break. It adopted a Fabian delay, avoiding direct battles, and instead used harassment and attrition to slowly weaken Hannibal's army. In the meantime, Rome raised new legions and took the battle to Iberia and Sicily. In Sicily, Syracuse joined Hannibal when it seemed Rome was about to be defeated. The city was protected by Archimedes' ingenious inventions, but it eventually fell to Rome after a siege. In Spain, a Roman army under a young Publius Cornelius Scipio took New Carthage in 209, with both audacity and logistics, beat Carthaginian field armies at Becula the next year, and at Ilipa in 206. This effectively ended Punic Spain. Back on the Italian peninsula, Rome was hurt but recovered. Hasdrubal Barca, Hannibal's brother, crossed the Alps from Iberia, only to get intercepted and lose his army at the Metaurus. His head sent to his brother. As Iberia slipped away, eyes turned to Africa, where the Berber states would prove decisive. In eastern Numidia, the Massiliae, Gaia ruled. His son Masinissa grew into a hard, clever rider, and early on fought for Carthaginian generals in Spain. In western Numidia, the Massicili, Syphax built a rival court near Siga, weighing both Roman overtures and Punic dowries. Farther west, Mauretania condensed under early kings, whose later successors would style themselves friends and allies of Rome. But for now, they simply watched and traded, always looking toward the Phoenician trading cities on the coast. Masinissa, seeing Spain tilt Roman and suspecting Carthage would not reward him long, shifted allegiance to Scipio and Rome. Syphax, wooed by an offer from the Carthaginian noble Hasdrubal Gisco for a marriage to his daughter Sophonisba, shifted to Carthage. When Scipio invaded Africa, he brought both Roman legions and Numidian cavalry under Masinissa. One night, a swift attack set the camps of Hasdrubal and Syphax ablaze, and their combined armies, caught between flame and panic, collapsed. At the Great Plains, Scipio was able to beat them decisively. Syphax was captured soon after at Cirta, as he tried to rally in the west. Masinissa in turn married Sophonisba, but under Roman pressure sent her poison to prevent her from being taken back to be paraded through Rome in chains. He lost love, but secured a more important kingship, and was able to unite the east and west Numidian kingdoms into one. As the situation grew dire, Carthage still had one hope: to recall Hannibal. He came home to an Africa that had changed. Masinissa's riders now hunted for Rome. On the plain near Zama, Hannibal set his elephants forward, mercenaries and citizen troops in layers. But Scipio opened lanes for the elephants, held his maniples tight, and when Numidian and Roman cavalry drove Carthage's horsemen off the field, they returned after a stalemate, hitting the Carthaginians from the rear, the very same tactic the Punic general had inflicted on others. Hannibal had lost his only set-piece battle, and with it the war. The treaty ended an age. Carthage kept its city and nearby lands, but was stripped of empire. They were forced to surrender Spain, pay an indemnity of 10,000 talents over 50 years, give up its war elephants, reduce its navy to 10 triremes, and most humiliating, agreed not to wage war, even in Africa, without Roman consent. Masinissa was recognized as king of unified Numidia, free to reclaim ancestral lands, which in practice meant gnawing Carthage's frontiers whenever Rome looked away. To the west, Mauretania stepped more boldly into old Punic markets as they had access to the sea. As for Carthage, the harbours remained full for the time being. Grain still came down from the Magerda, scribes still inked contracts, and artisans continued their craft. But the city which once decided how far Roman ships could sail now needed its permission to raise a spear. It would take a generation for the tension between their wealth and humiliation to snap. But the memory of the harbours, the horsehead coins, the olive groves, and the tireless Numidian riders remained. Proof that for 3 centuries, North Africa was not a periphery of anyone's world, but a centre of its own.